Well, as always, we have enjoyed our visit here to Ichi Pines, and we're glad to see those that we've met before and to meet a few new ones. And so our prayers will be with you as we go back home in the morning. We have one more message tonight, and also in case any of you are interested in some of the compilations that I've done, I don't put my ideas in them. I just collect Bible and Spirit of Prophecy and put it together in such a way that the Spirit of Prophecy explains the Bible. And so I have 30 different compilations. They're out in where the Sabbath school rooms are after the meeting. If you would like to look them over, either myself or my wife will be out there to help you. But tonight we're going to look at one other. It's actually, as I mentioned in the beginning, it's not a covering of the person's life, but it's looking at a key event or two in a person's life that is very helpful, giving lessons for today. And the one that we're going to look at tonight is, are you like Mary or Martha? There was a very important difference between them, and we're going to look at it from several directions. In Luke 10, verses 38 to 40, we see both Martha and Mary. Now it came to pass as they went that he entered into a certain village, which was Bethany, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving, and came to him and said, Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? As we look at Martha, we see that she had a great desire to see Jesus have enough to eat and have something that was very special. It's not that she didn't love Jesus, but she wanted him to have a really nice meal, and she wanted to make sure that the house was clean, there was no dirt anywhere, and so she was busy doing that, kind of expecting that her sister would help her. But as she's working along, she realizes Mary's not here. And she realizes where she is. Now, I think that we have a term today that Martha might fall under, and that's workaholic. There are all kinds of addictions, and workaholic is one of those addictions that unfortunately I've had to struggle with during my life, because there's always so much work to do, and there's so many people that are not workaholics and they're glad to let you do it. And so it seems like maybe that was the situation here, that Mary was willing to let Martha carry a heavier load of work. So Martha came to Jesus to help her. Bid her, therefore, that she help me. This is now going on in Luke 10, 40 to 42. And Jesus answered and said unto her, Martha, Martha, thou art careful, or in other words, you're worried and troubled, which means you're busy fussing around to make sure everything is right, about many things. But one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Now, there needs to be work done, but I believe what Jesus was saying to Martha, I would be willing to have you do less work to make me comfortable and come and listen to what I have to say. That would make me happier. You know, when we're a workaholic, we tend to do too much in certain areas. And Jesus would have been happy probably with some fresh fruit and whatever else could be pulled together quickly, instead of having a big meal prepared for him. Because he recognized the importance of spiritual things, that they need to come first, and that they're the most important. And here was an opportunity that was going to pass. And so Martha didn't see the importance of taking advantage of that opportunity. What she saw is making sure that Jesus was well cared for, but mixed in that probably there was this attitude, I don't want him to see any dirt in my house. I want to make sure that everything is completely clean. And Jesus would say to her, if he could, I'm not bothered by a little dirt. I would rather have you listening to what I have to share, because it will help you to get to the kingdom of heaven. And once you get to the kingdom of heaven, what does it matter about whether everything was always done, like it should be? And we kind of make trouble for each other too, because people come to our house, and if they see something that's not in order, they tell others about it. And so it kind of pushes the Marthas to neglect the spiritual part. And this is not a good plan. In the second volume of Spirit of Prophecy, page 358, it says Jesus' first visit, so this was the first time he came to their house. Jesus' first visit at the house of Lazarus was when he and his disciples were weary from the toilsome journey on foot from Jericho to Jerusalem. So he no doubt felt like resting, Jesus was like us. He got tired. He got hungry. He had all the same things that we have to put up with. Notwithstanding the fatigue of Jesus, he continued the instruction which he had been giving his disciples on the road in reference to the qualifications necessary to fit men for the kingdom of heaven. So was this an important message that he was giving? Even now, we have to study to make sure we understand the qualifications it takes to make it to heaven. And so he was explaining that important subject, righteousness by faith. He was explaining to her. And he wished that Martha would be as interested as Mary was in that instruction. Martha had been all anxiety to provide for the comfort of her guests. But Mary was charmed by the words of Jesus to his disciples. So she must have overheard some of what Jesus was saying, and she thought, wow, I need to hear some more. And seeing a golden opportunity to become better acquainted with the doctrines of Christ, quietly entered the room where he was sitting, and taking her place at the feet of Jesus, drank in eagerly every word that fell from his lips. Now, why didn't Martha have that same hunger? She was too tuned to the work that needed to be done. And so she was not affected in the same way that Mary was. Now, Mary perhaps was a little on the lazy side, but Nonetheless, on this occasion, she was doing what was the most important to be done. The energetic Martha was meanwhile making ample preparations for the entertainment of her guests and missed her sister's help. Finally, she discovered that Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening with rapt attention to what he was saying. Martha, wearied with many cares, was so vexed to see her sister calmly listening thus that she forgot the courtesy due to her guest and openly complained of Mary's idleness and appealed to Jesus that he would not permit all the domestic duties to fall upon one. And I thought this was very interesting. She was busy trying to make Jesus comfortable, but in getting churned up about Mary, she made Jesus uncomfortable in an area that he was more concerned about than the one that she was concerned about. And so here are some of the pitfalls of those that discover that they have trouble getting in the devotional time, getting in the adequate time to study and pray. It's because they are not recognizing that that is a lot more important than the other. And they get irritated sometimes at those that see the importance of the spiritual. That which Jesus indicated that Martha needed was a calm, devotional spirit. It's kind of like he was saying, Martha, if you had spent more time in your worship, you wouldn't have gotten irritated at your sister. Jesus indicated that Martha needed was a calm, devotional spirit, a deeper anxiety to learn more concerning the future immortal life and the graces necessary to spiritual advancement. She needed less anxiety for earthly things, which pass away, and more for heavenly things, which affect the eternal welfare of the soul. Do you think in the last end of time, as things are really winding up, that we're going to feel bad that we spent so much time in devotion? Or are we going to feel bad that we hadn't spent more time in devotion? And less time in the things, yes, they need to be done, but not at the expense of our time with the Lord. Now, one of the things that I have to struggle with is gardening, because I love to garden. And then, of course, as a pastor, you have certain things you have to do. And so if I'm not careful, I get too much time in doing things that need done, but not enough with the things of heaven. It is necessary to faithfully perform the duties of the present life, but Jesus would teach his children that they must seize every opportunity to gain that knowledge which will make them wise unto salvation. Now, at the end, we're going to look at a few areas that we tend to neglect, but that's an important idea, that we need to grab every opportunity to gain the knowledge which will help us to be saved in the end. One of the dangers of the present age is devoting too much time to business matters and to unnecessary cares which we create for ourselves, while the development of Christian character is neglected. That actually points out that maybe we spend too much time earning a living so that we can have a comfortable life, and that it might be better for us, as far as eternity is concerned, to be satisfied with less so that we have adequate time to prepare for eternity. And of course, there's a point at which you can't cut back anymore, or you don't even have food to eat, and so on. But there's a lot of things that the world has to have that we don't have to have in order to make it to heaven. And so if we would be satisfied with less, we would have more time for this. Careful, energetic Marthas are needed for this time. A self-supporting institution does not succeed without some Marthas. But it goes on to say, who will blend with their prompt, decisive qualities that better part of which Christ spoke. A character of such combined strength and godliness is an unconquerable power for good. So if Martha learns the lesson of putting the spiritual things first, she is the person you want to have. And that's what God needs to finish his work. He needs people that like to work, that enjoy their work, and yet get that balance, that better part in there, so that they are the kind of person they ought to be. You know, the effectiveness of our work depends more upon the kind of person we are than the work we do, although we have to do the work. And so when we have a close spiritual relationship with God, and our character is more like Jesus, then we might do a little less work, but it accomplishes more in the end. And that's what Martha needed to learn. In Heavenly Places, page 63, it says, Jesus tells her, that's Martha, not to allow the cares of the household to disturb the peace of her soul. Martha, it's not worth getting upset over this. And as we think about it, you know, when we get upset and frustrated with people, it damages our health. And God doesn't want that. And he recognized that she was spiritually weak, and that's why she got upset. Also in Desire of Ages 525, Mary was storing her mind with the precious words falling from the Savior's lips, words that were more precious to her than earth's most costly jewels. Now, I'm sure all of you have had some type of food you didn't like too well, and you kept eating it, and eventually you really loved it. And so it's the same with time with Jesus and spiritual things. If we don't spend enough, then we don't have much craving. But if we spend enough time, now we have a craving that's going to drive us and push us to make sure that we get that time. And so for Mary, she had it. And just to have a chance to listen to what Jesus was talking about was more precious to her than earth's most costly jewels or anything else that the world might have to offer. She'd be willing to do without the jewels just to be able to, listen to him. Well, everything in the Bible is Jesus speaking to us. Everything in the spirit of prophecy is Jesus speaking to us. And so as we get the taste for this, we just never can quite get enough. We want to have more and more of it. In our high calling, page 281, Martha was so anxious for all due honor to be given to Christ that in her active preparations and provision of food, she lost the most precious golden moments of listening to instruction from his divine lips. So she thought she was honoring Jesus by being very busy doing all these things, but actually she would have honored Jesus if she had taken time to sit there and maybe provide him a simpler meal. Mary sat at his feet to catch every word. She regarded this of highest importance. This offended Martha. And she asked the Lord Jesus if he did not care that she served alone. So she jumps on Jesus. Why didn't you send her to help me? This offended Martha, and she asked the Lord Jesus if he did not care that she served alone, while Mary shunned these responsibilities. Now, why was Mary so hungry for the words of Jesus? I think we find the answer in Luke 8, verse 2. And certain women which had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary, called Magdalene, out of whom went 7 devils. So apparently she had a lot of things wrong with her when Jesus found her. And he delivered her from those things. And so this put in her heart a love for Jesus. And really, if we were to stop and think, there's not one of us that Jesus hasn't done an awful lot for. We might not have been demon-possessed. We might not have been an adulterous person. But if we think about the various things that we have done in the past and realize the damage we've done to different people and to God's cause and all that, we have plenty to make us really thankful and really hungry to hear more from him so that we don't do those things anymore. Again, we find it in Mark 16, verse 9. Now, when Jesus was risen early, the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. So we know that she really had been a needy person. Our High Calling 281 says, every word from the lips of Jesus was precious. Is that the way we are? Every word that we read from the Bible is precious. Every word in the spirit of prophecy is precious. If so, we're becoming like Mary. It was joy to him to see Mary appreciate his instruction. Notice that. It made him happier that she wanted to listen than for what Martha was doing for his comfort. The more frequently the words of Christ are heard, the more deeply do they influence the mind. One reason why Jesus said we need to become as little children is that when we hear something that we heard before, we tend to say, I've already heard that. But a little child, when they hear something good, they want to hear it again. And so each time we go over it, it should more deeply influence the mind. It should become more precious. The better they are understood, and the more easily and perfectly are they obeyed. So if we go over it again, we understand it better. It's made easier for us to obey what he said to do, and we definitely need that in many areas still. In Desire of Ages 525, it says, the cause of Christ needs careful, energetic workers. There is a wide field for the Marthas with their zeal in active religious work. But let them first sit with Mary at the feet of Jesus. So, while we really need Marthas in God's work, in every aspect of God's work, and of course, we're talking about Martha, but men have the same need that Martha had. And we need people that are really energetic and want to accomplish a lot. But notice it says first. First, they need to sit at the feet of Jesus. Let diligence, promptness, and energy be sanctified by the grace of Christ. Then the life will be an uncontrollable power for good. Unconquerable power for good, yes. Now, let's just think about this for a moment. In Martha's situation, of course, Jesus did not allow her unkind remark to drive him away. But when a person who is a very energetic worker has this tendency, they're working hard to win souls maybe, or to do the things that would cause souls to be won, but then they get upset and they damage those souls. And so it's kind of like climbing up a steep mountain, and you're taking a lot of steps up, but you keep sliding back. And so not as much gets accomplished as what it might look like. When we understand that every Martha needs to really first sit with Mary at the feet of Jesus, then they may accomplish less work, but it will be more effective work, and they won't be slipping back like Martha was doing. In Welfare Ministry, I found this on page 150. All who work for God should have the Martha and the Mary attributes blended. A willingness to minister and a sincere love of the truth. So here's what God would like to have it be. That those that are like Mary, that maybe are a little off balance and they let other people do the work, and because they want to make sure that they get all of their time with devotions and everything, they need to grow in being willingness to minister and consider it a privilege to do the work that needs to be done. And the Marthas need to slow down and take some time with Jesus so that they can have that aspect of their life also. And so we have both in every self-supporting institution I've ever seen, and that's the recipe for success that God has given to us, how we can be the most effective. And you know, one thing that helps is that if the Marys are willing to do their share of the work, it makes it easier for the Marthas to take time for devotion. And so we end up helping each other to really be able to be the best workers possible. Now, I had a question. Did Martha learn her lesson? Well, possibly she did, after Jesus died, I don't know. But here we have another story in John 12, 1-3, that came after. The other one was the first visit of Jesus to that town. This one is close to his death. We studied a little bit of this earlier. Jesus came to Bethany. There they made him a supper, and Martha served. So there she is doing it again. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Desire of Ages comments on this second time that Martha is busy making sure that they have a wonderful meal for Jesus and others that are there. Desire of Ages 5:58 and 9. Martha served at the table, but Mary was earnestly listening to every word from the lips of Jesus. In his mercy, Jesus had pardoned her sins. He had called forth her beloved brother from the grave, and Mary's heart was filled with gratitude. So she's the same Martha. I didn't check to see how much time went by, but probably at least a couple of years, maybe close to 3 years went by, and Martha still was struggling with that same tendency to be more interested in the physical comfort than she was in drinking in the words of life. But I trust that she gained the victory later on. And, you know, I found it a struggle that doesn't go away quick, because God's work has so much that needs to be done. And that was one reason I didn't want to take on Youth for Jesus. But finally, I agreed to do it. Now, here's some applications of this that takes place in our life. The first one is to learn to be faithful in our personal devotions. Taking time on a regular basis with God in prayer and study. Because without that, we are in danger of doing what she did during that day. And I've learned a hard lesson in some situations because I said something that was unkind to someone, and it was traceable back to that, of why I did that. So that's an important one. Another one is faithful in church attendance. You've probably read some of the quotes about how that God pours out His Holy Spirit, especially when we get together. And so if we skip church, or skip Vespers, or skip, the special gatherings that are called, and I realize sometimes there are reasons for not attending that you can't help. But I think there's a lot of times that we stay away when we should have gone. And we may miss something that we really need, because God uses that opportunity to try to help us. In the time of Israel, if they called a meeting and people didn't go, it was serious business. They were cut off from Israel. Wow. People get alarmed if we try to have required attendance and take record of who's there, and they get uptight about that. But you wouldn't want to be an Israelite then, because you could have lost your life for not attending. Number 3, seek to simplify our duties. How can we reduce our wants to the place where we have the time to be a Mary? We have to simplify our duties. We have to not only be settled with less. Someone was talking on the radio one time about all the gadgets and so on that we can buy today. And they said everything you add, you have to dust it, you have to grease it, you have to take care of it. And so, we need to learn to cut back and have less things that we have to take care of so that we have time. And even learning efficiency and some of those habits to where we do the same job, but we do it in less time than what it took us the last time to do it, so that we have that time. Simplify our duties is a very important habit for us to develop. I've already talked about number 4, to be satisfied with less. And number 5, we need to try to be a mixture of Mary and Martha. That's his ideal for each one of us. Yeah. So I hope that this has stirred your thinking in these lines, and we don't want to discourage the Marthas. They're very valuable. And yet, what good would it do if we did lots and lots of work and we didn't make it to heaven? What good would that be, really, in the end? So, God is calling us to learn, to get balanced, and he's also calling those that are like Mary and that are easily able to let somebody else do it, to recognize the struggle they have and try to help them with the work so that they can have time for devotion and for going to meetings and all the rest that it takes to get ready for the kingdom.